Welcome back to Living the Good Life. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We are proud to announce that we recently finished our 20th episode of Living the Good Life. So we are going to do a bit of a review of all the episodes. Our friends at Google Notebook compiled a bit of a talk based on our previous audio that we sent to them. We're going to do it in two parts. There will be a part about travel, and we were talking about several different kinds of travel, and so as not to make it too long, there'll be a part 1 and part 2.
Imagine you've just spent like 12 absolutely exhausting hours traveling. I mean, you've navigated the chaotic airport terminals, you've squeezed into this shockingly narrow airplane seat, you've somehow wrangled your luggage into a taxi, and finally, you arrive at your destination.
Right, you're just running on fumes at that point.
Exactly. So you approach the front desk of your hotel, you confirm your reservation for a fully accessible room, you grab your key card, and you ride the elevator up. You swipe the card, push open the door, and the bed in front of you is 30 inches off the ground.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
And for a wheelchair user, that 30-inch mattress might as well be glued to the ceiling. So today, we're really tearing down this pervasive myth of the ADA checklist, and we're completely redefining what travel actually looks like for real bodies.
It's such a phenomenal topic, to be honest, because it forces us to really re-examine the built environment that we interact with every single day. I mean, most people just assume that if a space is legally compliant, it's functionally usable.
Right, which makes total sense on the surface.
Right, but what we're going to explore today is how architectural compliance routinely, and I mean routinely, fails human reality. And more importantly, we're looking at how travelers and certain segments of the travel industry are radically adapting to those failures.
Yeah, okay, let's unpack this, because the mission of today's deep dive is to go through this incredibly rich, just eye-opening stack of material from the Living the Good Life series.
This is a fantastic series.
It really is. The sources we have in front of us are this massive collection of highly detailed travel logs, hotel accessibility audits, remote expedition reviews. I mean, we are going to be tracking journeys that stretch from the ancient bicycle-choked cobblestones of Amsterdam all the way to the rugged Alaskan wilderness and even into the massive inland seas of the American Great Lakes.
Yeah, it's a huge geographical spread.
Totally. But we aren't just looking at tourist hotspots here. We're looking at how people explore the world when they are navigating what our sources refer to as body disruptions, which, by the way, I think is just a brilliant umbrella term.
It really is. It covers physical disabilities, chronic illnesses, mobility limitations, neurodivergence. It's very inclusive.
Exactly. We're looking at how people travel at a pace that honors their actual bodies rather than just like constantly fighting against them.
And what's fascinating here is that this material operates as so much more than just a set of travel itineraries. It's really this profound exploration of geography, of human empathy, and the hidden mechanical layers of accessibility that most travelers never even realize exist.
Yeah.
It challenges the very baseline of what makes a physical space welcoming. Because, as you pointed out with that hotel room example right at the start, a space can legally invite you in while simultaneously putting up physical barricades to your actual comfort.
Right. So before we can embark on these grand, sweeping adventures to the Alaskan wilderness or whatever, we have to look at the absolute baseline of travel, because the foundation of any trip anywhere on Earth is a hotel room.
100%.
If you cannot rest safely, if you can't use the bathroom safely, if you just cannot recharge your physical and mental batteries, the destination outside that room honestly doesn't matter. Like, the museum could be spectacular, but if your launch pad is compromised, you never get off the ground.
That's a really crucial framing. The hotel room is the foundational infrastructure of travel. And our sources reveal this massive, just pervasive blind spot in the modern travel industry, which is the deeply ingrained idea that ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, that ADA compliance is synonymous with comfort or even true functional accessibility.
And they're not the same thing.
Not even close.
This totally blew my mind as I was reading through the audits, because I think, like a lot of people, I just assumed ADA regulations were this comprehensive safety net, like they had it all figured out.
Yeah, that's the common assumption.
But the sources make it crystal clear that ADA compliance is merely the legal minimum. It is a rigid, architectural checklist. It's a set of measurements. It is absolutely not a guarantee that a specific room will actually work for a unique human being navigating a specific body disruption.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the ADA requires structural modifications, right? Like widened doorways to accommodate the width of a standard wheelchair, or the installation of grab bars near toilets, visual alarm systems for the hearing impaired, and those are vital.
Oh, absolutely vital.
They're legally mandated baselines. But the law doesn't aggressively regulate the nuanced functional details of living. Like, it dictates the width of the door, but it doesn't necessarily dictate the specific layout of the furniture once you actually get through that door.
And that is exactly where the concept of compliance falls completely apart in the real world. Let's go back to that 30-inch bed example.
Yeah.
You know, you might look at a high bed and think, oh, that feels luxurious, like sleeping on a cloud or whatever.
Sure.
But break down the actual physical mechanics for us. Why is a 30-inch bed in an ADA room such a catastrophic failure in design?
It really just comes down to basic biomechanics and physics.
Yeah.
So a standard manual or power wheelchair seat typically sits about, let's say, 19 to 20 inches off the ground.
Okay.
If an individual with limited or zero lower body mobility needs to get out of that chair and into bed, they have to perform a lateral transfer. They're relying entirely on upper body strength, leverage, and momentum to slide from the chair to the mattress.
Right.
Now, if the bed is relatively level with the chair, say 20 to 22 inches high, that transfer is a horizontal movement. It's manageable. But if the bed is 30 inches high, you're suddenly demanding that this person perform an uphill pivot transfer.
So they're having to lift their entire body weight, essentially dead weight, like 10 or 11 vertical inches, using nothing but shoulder leverage.
Precisely. Biomechanically, it's an impossible ask for a lot of people. The bed becomes a literal wall. The room is legally compliant because the door was wide enough to let the chair in, but the user is fundamentally trapped in their chair because they can't get into the bed.
Wow.
Yeah, so the hotel checked the legal box, but they completely failed the human being.
And the sources outline a whole catalog of these hidden hazards. Like, they talk about the roll-in shower that has a surprise 3-inch lip at the entrance to keep the water in.
Oh, that's a classic one.
Right. And to a walking guest, a 3-inch lip is basically invisible. You just step right over it without thinking. But think about the front casters on a wheelchair, those really small wheels at the front. A 3-inch lip stops them dead.
It acts like a parking block.
Exactly. A 3-inch lip is not a roll-in shower. It's a barricade that requires you to pop a wheelie over wet tile, which is incredibly dangerous.
Or consider the equipment that's actually provided. The sources detail this all-too-common scenario of the wobbly, unstable plastic shower chair that a hotel just sort of tosses into the back of a closet.
Oh, yeah, the flimsy ones.
Yeah. It isn't anchored to the wall. It isn't medically rated. It's just a cheap plastic stool sitting on slippery, soapy tile. I mean, that isn't accessibility. That's just a massive liability waiting to happen.
My personal favorite, and by favorite, I mean the one that made me want to pull my hair out, was the thermostat.
Oh, right.
The sources described this fully certified, supposedly wheelchair-accessible room where the thermostat to control the air conditioning was placed 6 feet up the wall.
Which is just, it's absurd.
It is. If you're sitting in a chair, you literally cannot reach it. You are trapped in a room where you have zero autonomy over your own environment. Or the peephole on the door, also drilled in at 6 feet high. You hear a knock, and you have absolutely no way of verifying who is standing on the other side of your door.
It just highlights a profound disconnect between the architects who are drafting the blueprints and the actual end users experiencing the space. I mean, the architect drew a box that said door, but they didn't think about the sight lines of the person opening it.
Yeah.
And this unpredictability, this constant friction of arriving at a hotel and wondering which crucial element is going to be wildly misconfigured is exactly why the sources pivot to a really surprising defense of mid-scale chain hotels.
Yes.
Specifically, they highlight brands like the Holiday Inn Express.
See, I really have to push back on this a bit because I have always viewed those massive standardized chains as just painfully bland.
A lot of people do.
Right, because if you're traveling to, say, a vibrant historic city, isn't staying in a copy-pasted room across 2,000 identical locations just sacrificing the magic of travel? Like, you're trading the cultural immersion of a cool local boutique hotel for a beige box that looks exactly the same whether you're in Ohio or Florida. You're trading wonder for boredom.
From the perspective of a traveler without a body disruption, your critique is entirely valid. It is a sacrifice of local flavor. But this raises a really important question that the sources bring up. What is the psychological and physical cost of a surprise?
The cost of a surprise.
Yes, because for a traveler navigating chronic fatigue or a visual impairment or neurodivergence, a charming boutique hotel often translates directly into a maze of exhausting, unpredictable variables.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, unpredictability drains energy. Predictability, on the other hand, is accessibility. When a traveler with these specific needs walks into a standardized chain hotel, the layout is a known quantity. They instantly know that the bathroom door slides to the left, they know the bed is uniformly 22 inches high, and they know the light switch is exactly where their hand expects it to be on the wall.
So they don't have to solve the spatial puzzle of a new room.
Exactly. Every single ounce of mental bandwidth and physical energy you save by not having to hunt for an outlet or rearrange furniture to make your chair fit or figure out some bizarrely designed modern shower. That is energy you can bank and spend on actually enjoying the vacation the next day.
That makes so much sense. It's all about cognitive load. If you're already burning massive amounts of energy just navigating an airport or a new city in a body that requires constant management, the last thing you want is for your bedroom to be an escape room puzzle. You need it to be a frictionless environment.
And the sources share this brilliant historical anecdote about Ray Charles that perfectly illustrates this exact dynamic.
Yes, I loved this detail. Because Ray Charles, one of the most famous musicians in the world, could have afforded to stay in literally any luxury penthouse on the planet. But he famously favored staying at Holiday Inns, particularly back when they were one of the very first chains to aggressively enforce identical standardized room layouts across all their properties.
Because for a traveler with total blindness, that standardization was the ultimate luxury. He could walk into a Holiday Inn in Seattle or a Holiday Inn in Miami, and his mental map of the room was instantly, flawlessly accurate.
Right, he wasn't stressing about tripping over a randomly placed modernist coffee table.
Exactly. Or feeling along unfamiliar walls just to find the bathroom door. The architecture was predictable, which meant his autonomy was guaranteed.
It really reframes the idea of what luxury actually is. Luxury isn't always high thread count sheets. Sometimes luxury is simply the absence of friction. But the sources are also very pragmatic here. Even at a chain hotel, how do you guarantee you're actually getting that predictable, accessible room? They point out some serious red flag language to watch out for during the booking process.
They absolutely stress that travelers cannot rely on vague adjectives.
Yeah.
The primary advice is to demand nouns and numbers.
Right. If you call a front desk to confirm your reservation and you ask if the room is accessible and the clerk says, oh yeah, it's pretty accessible or it should be fine for a wheelchair, the sources say you need to hang up and run.
Pretty accessible is hospitality speak for. The front door is wide, but good luck getting your chair close enough to the bathroom sink to actually wash your hands.
Yeah.
A traveler with a body disruption cannot survive on pretty accessible. They need quantitative, verifiable data to ensure their safety.
So you don't ask, is the bed okay? You have to ask, can you take a tape measure and tell me exactly how many inches high the top of the mattress is from the floor? You literally have to force the hotel to quantify their compliance.
But even with rigorous pre-trip verification, the travel industry is chaotic, right? Rooms get double booked, pipes burst, miscommunications happen. So what do you do when you show up at midnight, exhausted, and the hotel has given your specifically required accessible room away? Or they try to put you in a room with a massive step up to the bathroom.
This was a piece of advocacy in the sources that I think everyone, disabled or not, needs to know. They outline a specific legal protocol known in the industry as the ADA walk.
It is a critical tool of self-advocacy. If a hotel cannot provide the specific disability accommodating room that you booked, confirmed, and paid for, they can't just shrug their shoulders and say, sorry, we're full.
Right, they can't just kick you to the curb.
No, it is their legal and financial responsibility to rebook you at a comparable nearby hotel that does have an accessible room available, and they must cover the cost of your transportation to get there.
You really have to know your rights. You're not being a difficult guest or a Karen for demanding the basic foundational requirement of your stay. You are simply holding the corporation to a binding legal contract.
And we really cannot discuss the foundation of accessible travel without addressing a massive, often completely invisible demographic that the sources shine a very bright light on: the caregivers.
Yes, the spouses, the adult children, the partners, the dedicated nurses. Caregivers are fundamentally the human infrastructure that makes travel possible for countless people with severe body disruptions. Yet, as the sources point out, the travel industry almost never designs spaces with the caregiver in mind. They're basically an afterthought, if they're thought of at all.
Think about the physical toll of caregiving in a space not designed for it. The sources highlight the critical need for lower beds, not just for the traveler transferring from a wheelchair, but for the caregiver.
Oh,
If a bed is too high or too low, a caregiver who has to physically assist with turning or lifting a partner is risking severe lumbar back strain. If the caregiver blows out their back on day 2 of a 14-day trip, the vacation is over. It becomes a medical emergency for both of them.
and it isn't just the physical strain, right? It's the psychological space. If you're traveling as a caregiver, you are essentially on the clock 24 hours a day.
Absolutely.
The sources emphasize the need for rooms that offer separate sleeping spaces, or even just a heavy curtain or a partial architectural divider. Caregivers need a basic sense of privacy to decompress, to read a book with a light on, to simply have a moment where they aren't visually monitoring their partner.
Furthermore, they require logistical proximity. An accessible room should ideally be located close to the elevator banks. Why? Because it's often the caregiver who is making multiple trips to haul heavy medical equipment, or making quick runs to get ice for medications, or pushing a manual chair.
Right, if you stick the accessible room at the very end of a quarter-mile-long carpeted hallway, you are taxing the caregiver's physical endurance before they even get to the lobby.
Exactly.
So if we conclude that land-based architecture, no matter how many ADA laws we pass or how rigorously we measure the beds, will always have these unpredictable friction points, from narrow doorways to exhausted caregivers, what's the solution? How do we bypass the friction of the land entirely?
The answer the sources provide is fundamentally a geographical workaround. If the land is hostile, you bypass the land. You take the hotel with you.
Which brings us to the second major revelation of this deep dive, the floating resort, cruising as the ultimate adaptive travel hack.
It represents a total paradigm shift in how we approach accessible travel.
Now, I have to be completely honest here. Before reading these sources, I had a massive, deeply ingrained prejudice against the cruise industry.
A lot of people do, yeah.
I always pictured it as the absolute worst aspects of mass tourism, like thousands of people fighting over buffet shrimp, forced bingo games by the pool, overwhelming noise, and just a general feeling of being trapped in a floating shopping mall. I completely wrote it off as unauthentic travel.
That is a very common perception, especially among travelers who prioritize rugged, independent exploration. But when you look at cruising through the lens of body disruptions, the narrative flips entirely. The sources argue that a modern cruise ship is structurally the most enabling environment on the planet.
And they back it up with some incredibly compelling architectural evidence. The term they use that really stuck with me is the zero-trip environment.
It's a great term.
If you're a full-time power chair user, or someone with cerebral palsy, or even just someone who is 6 weeks out from a knee replacement surgery, terrain is your absolute biggest enemy. On land, you're constantly battling curbs, potholes, tree roots pushing up sidewalks, steps into restaurants.
But a cruise ship is an engineered bubble of accessibility. There are no curbs on a ship. Ramps aren't these hastily added wooden structures in a back alley. They are gently graded, seamlessly integrated parts of the deck design. Hallways are wide and perfectly flat. Doors to public spaces are universally automatic.
Wow, yeah.
And crucially, there are massive vertical elevator banks located at the forward, midship, and aft sections of the vessel. You can traverse a city-sized structure for 14 days and completely bypass a single set of stairs.
But I still wrestled with the psychological aspect of it when reading this. Let's say we dock in a beautiful Mediterranean port. Everyone rushes off the ship to go ziplining or take a grueling walking tour of ancient ruins. But my body is just done. I've hit a wall, my pain levels are spiking, and I physically cannot leave the ship. What about the FOMO? The fear of missing out. If I have to stay behind, aren't I just trapped in a floating hotel room while everyone else is experiencing the world?
This is exactly where the sources introduce the concept of energy autonomy. And it is a brilliant psychological reframing. Let's compare the land to the sea. If you're staying at a land-based resort in Cancun and you have a flare-up of chronic fatigue, you have to stay in your room while your family goes down to the beach. You're lying in bed staring at a drywall ceiling. You are entirely removed from the experience of travel.
Right, you feel like a burden and you feel isolated.
But on a cruise ship, your room is the experience. If you need to rest, you don't feel like you're missing the destination because the destination is moving past your window. You can lie in your bed, open the balcony door, feel the sea breeze, and watch the ocean, the fjords of the islands slide by. You're still actively participating in the journey, but you're doing it entirely on your body's terms without expending a single calorie of energy.
It's literally a built-in escape hatch that travels with you. Think about the logistics. If you're in a crowded city and you suddenly get overwhelmed, whether it's pain or sensory overload, you have to figure out how to escape. You have to find a bench, call an Uber, wait on a busy curb, navigate foreign traffic, and finally get back to your hotel. It is an exhausting process just to find relief.
It really is.
On a ship, you can go down to a massive, loud, Broadway-style show in the main theater. You can push your boundaries and participate in the fun. But the moment the lights or the crowd become too much, a dark, quiet, safe room containing your own bed and your own medications is literally a 5-minute frictionless elevator ride away. You never have to negotiate with a foreign transit system to find your sanctuary.
And that concept of sanctuary extends far beyond just having a quiet bedroom.
Right.
What is truly fascinating here is the unseen medical infrastructure of these modern ships.
This was wild to me.
For travelers navigating severe chronic conditions, or even individuals with terminal illnesses who are looking to take one last meaningful trip with their families. The idea of being hours away from a major hospital is paralyzing. It creates a baseline of anxiety that ruins the trip.
Because if something goes wrong on a walking tour in a small village, you're reliant on a rural clinic that might not speak your language or have your medical history.
Exactly. But modern cruise ships are designed as floating cities, which means they require city-level services. Down on the lower decks, usually hidden from the general passenger areas, these ships have incredibly advanced medical centers.
And we are not talking about a school nurse's office with a first aid kit, some aspirin, and a cot.
Far from it. We are talking about highly sophisticated mini hospitals. They're equipped with ICU-level stabilization gear, defibrillators, advanced cardiac monitors, full X-ray machines, and pharmacies. They're staffed by international teams of doctors and nurses who live on board.
That's incredible.
They even coordinate with specialized third-party medical companies. For example, there's a company called Dialysis at Sea that brings nephrologists and dialysis machines onboard specific sailings, allowing patients with end-stage renal disease to receive life-sustaining blood-filtering treatments while they cruise the Caribbean.
That is staggering. The sources even note a detail that is objectively grim, but for some travelers, it represents the ultimate realistic relief. These massive ships are equipped with on-board morgues. Now, no one wants to think about that on vacation, obviously. But if you're traveling with a terminal diagnosis, the psychological safety of knowing that clinical intervention and dignified handling of the worst-case scenario is literally under your feet cannot be overstated. It completely downregulates the nervous system's alarm bells. You can finally relax because the safety net is traveling with you.
That downregulation is key. And it isn't just about acute medical emergencies. For neurodivergent travelers or individuals prone to severe sensory overload, the cruise industry is actually pioneering some incredibly thoughtful accommodations. The sources highlight that several major cruise lines are now achieving certifications from organizations like Culture City.
What does that actually look like in practice on a ship? Because ships are notoriously loud.
It looks like intentionally designing environments for differing sensory bandwidths. Let's use an analogy. Imagine trying to tune a delicate radio to catch a faint signal, but someone is shining a massive strobe light in your eyes and blasting an air horn. Your brain's processing bandwidth is entirely consumed by filtering out the violent noise and light, leaving zero bandwidth for actually hearing the radio or enjoying the environment. That is what a standard casino or dining room feels like during sensory overload.
Wow, that's a great way to put it. So to counter that, the ships are creating designated low-sensory zones. These are quiet lounges where background music is strictly banned, the harsh overhead lighting is significantly dimmed, and the crowds are controlled. It gives the brain a place to reset. They also offer sensory bags at guest services, which include things like noise-canceling headphones and strobe reduction glasses for people prone to visually triggered migraines or seizures. They're integrating closed captioning on all the screens and braille on the elevator buttons and cabin doors throughout the ship.
They're also providing something profoundly important for certain medical conditions, which is climate control autonomy.
Yes, this is a massive issue for travelers undergoing active cancer therapies or individuals dealing with severe thyroid imbalances or menopause. Their internal body temperatures can wildly, violently fluctuate from freezing to sweating in minutes.
Oh, absolutely.
If you're on a tour bus, you cannot force 40 other people to blast the AC just because you're having a hot flash. But on a ship, you have a digital thermostat in your cabin. You have total, undisputed control over your immediate environment. You can drop the temperature to 60 degrees if that is what your physiology demands in that moment.
And we must mention the culinary infrastructure. For individuals with severe gastrointestinal disruptions, Crohn's disease, celiac disease, or life-threatening food allergies, traveling often devolves into what the sources call restaurant roulette.
That is the perfect term for it. Trying to explain the absolute severity of a cross-contamination peanut allergy to a busy waiter in a foreign language is a terrifying, exhausting nightmare. You are gambling with your health at every meal.
But on a cruise ship, the dining room operates on a pre-vetted system. When you book the cruise, you register your specific dietary customization with the accessibility department. When you sit down in the main dining room, the maitre d' and your dedicated waitstaff already have a digital profile of your needs.
That's so smart.
Your food is prepared in a dedicated allergy-safe galley. It removes an enormous amount of daily friction and anxiety. You can actually enjoy the food instead of interrogating it.
So we have thoroughly established that the cruise ship is the perfect, highly controlled, floating base camp. The architecture works, the medical safety nets are in place, the food is safe, but a base camp is useless if it doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
The destination absolutely matters. And this is where the sources throw us a massive curveball.
We aren't going to the predictable Caribbean islands or the crowded ports of the Mediterranean.
No. Instead, the sources take this floating base camp somewhere completely unexpected.
A quick but important note. The information shared in this podcast is for general educational and entertainment purposes only. We love sharing our insights, but please remember, this content does not constitute medical, health, or professional advice. Every body and every situation is unique. You should always consult with a qualified medical specialist or healthcare professional before starting any new program, making lifestyle changes, or acting on any information you hear today. Your health is your responsibility, so let's keep it safe.